Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. Wishing you all an enjoyable listening experience. The book I'm going to interpret for you today is Quirkology. It's a book that explores various peculiar phenomena in everyday life. The author of this book is Richard Wiseman, one of the most influential and authoritative professors of popular psychology worldwide. His research has been featured on over 150 television programs. And his psychological experiments are often conducted on a massive scale, including appearances on renowned media outlets like the BBC. In addition to this, he is also a professional magician and a best-selling author. What sets Wiseman apart is the eccentricity of his research field. From why people believe in astrology and paranormal events, to searching for the world's funniest jokes, Wiseman and his colleagues, guided by rigorous scientific spirit, study all sorts of bizarre phenomena in people's everyday lives. Sometimes, the research methods they employ are equally peculiar, with many famous experiments included in this book, Quirkology. The book consists of 6 chapters, featuring dozens of experiments investigating peculiar phenomena. At first glance, these experiments may seem unrelated. But when we peel back the layers, we discover that the issues they reveal are not only quirky but also directly related to some of our innermost psychology. In the following, I will select a few representative experiments and analyze the psychological motivations behind them, showing how they shed light on 3 key aspects. First, how we perceive ourselves. Second, how we view others. And third, how we connect with and influence one another. Now, let's delve into the first question: how do we perceive ourselves? First, let's discuss an experiment related to astrology. The first experiment was conducted by a psychology professor named Richard Wiseman in the 1940s. Initially, he asked his students to complete a personality test. A week later, he informed the students that the test results were ready. Each student received a brief personality description and was asked to rate its accuracy, with 0 indicating completely inaccurate and 5 indicating very accurate. Surprisingly, every student in the class raised their hands, with 87% of them giving scores of 4 or 5. This result left Farrell astonished because the personality descriptions he provided to the students had nothing to do with the personality test they had taken a week earlier. These descriptions were actually pieced together from an astrology book. What's more, every student received identical descriptions. Let's take a look at how these descriptions were written. You need others to like and admire you, yet you tend to be critical of yourself. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. You have a great deal of unused capacity that you have not turned to your advantage. You are a disciplined thinker, but that doesn't mean you are necessarily critical of others. You are often extroverted, affable, and sociable, but you can also be introverted when the situation demands. We often find horoscope readings to be surprisingly accurate, just like the descriptions provided by Professor Farrell. They are highly vague in general, yet people believe in them. The author of the book doesn't explain this phenomenon, so here's my analysis. Behind this lies a psychological motivation known as self-enhancement. It refers to the tendency of individuals to perceive themselves in a more favorable light when forming self-perceptions related to their image, attitude, and values. They tend to collect and interpret self-relevant information in a way that positively reinforces their self-image. Recall the personality descriptions we just read. It seems like most people would possess some of these traits, and every sentence can be interpreted positively. After all, everyone imagines themselves as having untapped potential, being independent thinkers, and more. That's why all the students, upon reading the descriptions, thought, yes, that's me. I'm a pretty great guy. Farrell and his followers' research reveals that astrology has deceived millions of people over thousands of years. Astrologers can fabricate readings as long as they are vague and flattering enough. Most people eagerly embrace these readings, saying, your analysis is incredibly accurate. However, Farrell didn't stop the experiment here. He was curious whether the students, upon discovering they had been fooled, would have their self-identities challenged. 3 weeks later, Farrell falsely claimed that he had accidentally erased the names from the scoring sheets and asked the students to honestly report their scores from 3 weeks prior. Surprisingly, among those who had initially given their personality descriptions high scores of 4 or 5, half of them now reported low scores. They claimed that they had actually rated themselves that way from the start. This result isn't surprising when considering attribution theory in psychology. In our daily lives, we encounter many situations and often seek reasons for why events occurred. During the attribution process, we exhibit a bias called the self-serving bias. This bias leads individuals to attribute their successes to internal factors like their abilities and efforts while attributing their failures to external factors like circumstances or other people's influence. People always strive to maintain a positive image, and if attributing failure to internal factors would lead to shame, they tend to protect their self-esteem by attributing it in ways that are favorable to themselves. Therefore, it's likely that Farrell's students attributed their gullibility to having a teacher who enjoys playing pranks rather than acknowledging it as their own gullibility. Next, let's explore another fascinating experiment, the Q test. I'd like you to follow my description and try this experiment yourself. Raise the hand you typically use for writing and use your index finger to draw a capital letter, Q, on your forehead. There are two possible outcomes. 1. The tail of the Q faces your right eye, meaning you've drawn it in a way that others can read it, but you may find it a bit awkward. 2. The tail of the Q faces your left eye, allowing others to immediately recognize the Q, but you might feel a bit uncomfortable with this orientation. This simple test can provide a rough measure of a person's self-monitoring ability. People with strong self-monitoring tendencies tend to draw the Q in a way that others can read it, while those with weaker self-monitoring tendencies naturally draw it in a way that they can read it themselves. So, what exactly is self-monitoring ability? It's the capacity to adjust one's behavior based on the perception of others during social interactions. Individuals with high self-monitoring tendencies tend to be more concerned with how others perceive them. They are skilled at self-presentation, adaptable, and flexible. However, they may also be adept at manipulating how others perceive them. In other words, they can be skilled at concealing and telling lies if necessary. Conversely, individuals with low self-monitoring tendencies are the opposite. They aren't skilled at adjusting themselves to fit social situations or paying much attention to the impact of their behavior on others. However, they remain consistent and are less inclined to lie or deceive. So, now that you've been listening to the program, you might have gained some insights into what type of person you are. That wraps up our discussion of the first question. Through these two experiments, we've learned that when people form self-perceptions related to their image, attitude, and values, they tend to engage in self-enhancement and attribute problems in a way that favors themselves. We've also discovered that self-monitoring ability can naturally make some people adept at lying, while others tend to remain true to themselves. Additionally, this book documents other intriguing experiments, such as how to detect lies and unveil the facade of false smiles. These experiments reveal that, in order to maintain consistency with their inner selves, even the best liars tend to subconsciously distance themselves from falsehoods. Thus, compared to truths, lies often lack personal emotion in detail. Sometimes, people pretend to smile, but it's only when they are genuinely happy that the muscles around their eyes contract to form a real smile. Genuine smiles are indeed a rare find. Now, let's move on to the second part, where we explore how we perceive others. Interestingly, we'll begin this rather serious topic with an experiment related to humor. This experiment can be considered historic in nature. Wiseman and his colleagues dedicated an entire year to scouring the globe for the funniest jokes. Astonishingly, they received over 40,000 jokes from 70 countries, with 350,000 participants rating these jokes. This experiment, the largest of its kind in history, even earned a place in the Guinness World Records. The jokes collected in this experiment were undeniably humorous, and delving into the psychology behind these jokes provides an engaging way to understand how we perceive others at times. First, let's listen to a few of the top-ranked jokes. 1. A teacher in a bad mood decided to take it out on the kids in the class. He said, "Anyone who thinks they're stupid, stand up." After a few seconds, only one child slowly stood up. The teacher looked at the child and asked, "Do you think you're stupid?" The child replied, "No, but I didn't want to see you standing there alone." In this joke, we witness a vulnerable child making a powerful teacher appear comical. 2. A husband stood on a coin-operated weighing scale, which claimed to measure both weight and luck. After inserting a coin, he received a white card with a message that read, "You are energetic, intelligent, and a great person." He called out to his wife, "Look at this. The card says I'm full of energy and intelligence, and I'm a great person." His wife nodded and said, "Don't forget, it also got your weight wrong." Clearly, this joke pokes fun at the husband, and many women find it amusing. 3. Now, here's the global champion of the joke experiment. Two hunters were walking in the forest when one suddenly fell to the ground, appearing lifeless with his eyes rolled back. The other hunter frantically pulled out his phone and called for emergency help, gasping, "My friend is dead. What do I do?" The dispatcher calmly replied, "Stay calm. First, let's make sure he's really dead." After a moment of silence, a gunshot was heard. The hunter returned to the phone and said, "Okay, now what?" In online voting, more than half of the participants found this joke extremely funny. It shares a common thread with the previous two jokes, making individuals appear foolish and unaware of their own foolishness. In Western humor, we often come across jokes that mock blondes' intelligence, poke fun at Jewish people, or stereotype Scots as stingy, among others. The superiority derived from these jokes actually stems from our sense of social identity. What is social identity? Our self-concept comprises two layers: personal identity, which relates to our individual characteristics and attitudes, and social identity, which concerns our sense of belonging and alignment with specific groups. In simpler terms, we categorize people, including ourselves, into various groups for memory and quick judgments. For example, I am an American, he is Chinese, I am a freelancer, you are an office worker. We then form a sense of self-esteem through our group affiliations. This concept may sound a bit complex, so let's simplify it. In everyday life, we often find that assigning people to different categories makes it easier for us to remember them and make quick initial judgments. For instance, when I say I'm an American, you automatically make certain assumptions about me. Similarly, when you identify as part of a specific group, it bolsters your self-esteem. For instance, being part of a group of independent women or cultured straight men creates a sense of us that enhances your self-concept. It feels great. That concludes our discussion of the second question. We often craft jokes about specific groups because our social identity provides us with a sense of superiority. Different jokes cater to different social identity needs, and there's no single joke that can make everyone burst into laughter. However, the process of seeking jokes sheds light on the angles from which we view others, revealing the prejudices and stereotypes that may exist within us. Next, let's delve into the third question and explore how we connect with others on a psychological level and influence each other. Since we live in society and among people, our psychology and behavior are subject to various social forces, cultures, and groups. These influences can lead us to exhibit conformity and obedience behaviors. A famous experiment conducted by Kim Polly-Weed at Wilmington Victoria University, known as the Weed experiment, sheds light on this. Weed initially recruited 20 participants and discreetly obtained childhood photos of them from their family members. Using Photoshop, the researchers then created a fake photo of each participant riding in a hot air balloon. Over the course of 2 weeks, participants underwent 3 interviews. During each interview, the researchers showed them this fake photo along with 3 genuine childhood photos, encouraging them to describe the experiences captured in the pictures. The experiment was presented as an investigation into why people remember their childhood experiences. During the first interview, nearly 1/3 of the participants claimed they had never been on a hot air balloon ride. However, the researchers asked all participants to think about it and reconsider. By the final interview, half of the participants had recalled a non-existent hot air balloon trip in vivid detail. So, why are people's memories so easily manipulated? This phenomenon can be attributed to the presence of psychological suggestion, which is the subconscious capacity to be influenced in terms of ideas, emotions, judgments, and attitudes by external sources or other people. It is an unconscious self-protective and learning mechanism developed over the course of our evolutionary history. In ancient times, survival conditions were harsh, and our ancestors needed to observe and learn from their peers to adapt effectively. Conforming to the attitudes, ideas, and actions of the group enhanced one's chances of receiving protection and survival support. Additionally, following the authority of those more experienced and powerful often reduced the risk of failure and harm in competitive situations. In this experiment, the researchers, acting as authorities in the field of psychology, suggested that participants had experienced a hot air balloon ride through the use of photos. Most participants, due to a desire to protect their self-image and comply with authority, found it difficult to deny or refute this suggestion. Subsequently, they used their imaginations to fill in the gaps in their memories. After a period of time, it became challenging to distinguish between fact and fiction, leading them to believe in a falsehood, much like how simple suggestions can make people recall non-existent childhood events. Author Wiseman and his friend Andy Nyman explored a similar concept with paranormal activity. They selected a dim and damp Victorian-style underground prison as their experimental setting. Several groups were invited to participate in what was described as a séance activity. Participants were asked to complete questionnaires about their belief in supernatural phenomena. In the dimly lit prison, Andy played the role of a medium, and participants gathered around a large table. He informed them that a Victorian-era singer named Marianne had been murdered there, and her ghost was often seen in the prison. Items like a wicker ball and scales were introduced as supposed relics of this non-existent singer. Everything in the room was coated with phosphorescent paint, making it visible in the dark. The séance began. Participants held hands, and candles were extinguished. The room fell into complete darkness. Andy claimed to be summoning the spirit of Marianne, and participants observed the wicker ball moving and the scales tipping, classic tricks used by mediums a century ago. The effects were still remarkably convincing. The astonishing part came during the follow-up. Over a third of the participants reported seeing the table levitate, a phenomenon that never actually occurred. Shockingly, this number exceeded two-thirds among those who initially believed in supernatural phenomena. Even among those who initially didn't believe, 50% claimed they saw the table levitate. Through these so-called séance activities, the experiment underscored the profound impact of authority, group dynamics, and culture on people's psychology and behavior. People tend to believe that mediums possess extraordinary abilities, and since the medium is perceived as the dominant figure in the séance, most participants unconsciously obeyed the medium's suggestions, striving to see the table levitate. They exhibited remarkable imaginations, and in a group where others were screaming and trembling in fear, it was challenging to remain composed. Being one of the few to resist conformity is not easy because social norms demand conformity with the group to gain acceptance and approval, avoiding rejection. This phenomenon is commonly referred to as conformity in psychology, where individuals change their behavior and beliefs under real or imagined group pressure. In this experiment, people's conforming behavior was highly evident. Of course, for those who believe in supernatural phenomena, the influence of their beliefs is much greater than those who do not believe. Therefore, more of them claim that the table is moving. Through the two experiments we've just discussed, we see how closely connected we are to others, constantly influenced by groups, authorities, and shared cultures. We easily accept suggestions from authorities and submit to them. We can't resist the power of the group and sometimes even change our beliefs and behaviors to align with the group. So, next, we will explore how we influence each other through a series of experiments. Psychologists approach this from the perspective of altruism, seeking to understand the interaction between helpers and those seeking help. In the first experiment, conducted by Baidu Sofer and his colleagues at Rutgers University in 1971, during a large protest in Washington, D.C., where over 20,000 Americans gathered to protest President Nixon's position on Vietnam, an actor with long hair and a beard posed as a peace protester and entered the crowd. He then pretended to have a medical issue, and other protesters quickly came to his aid. Many were willing to pay for his ride home, some even offered to drive him, and those without money or a car were willing to walk 10 kilometers with him. The next day, the same actor had cut his hair, shaved his beard, and changed into conservative clothing while holding a sign supporting Nixon. When he pretended to have a medical issue this time, the kind-hearted protesters were less inclined to help him. Why? It's because, for the protesters, this actor had shifted to the opposing side. Social psychology research indicates that people often help those who are similar to themselves. When the person in need is highly similar in terms of age, background, taste, nationality, or has similar attitudes, people are more willing to lend a hand. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Those who appear and behave similarly to us are more likely to share genes or come from the same group, making them more deserving of our kindness. Researchers also found that people in need who are attractive are more likely to receive assistance, especially when the person in need is a woman. Men exhibit a higher tendency to help than women, regardless of the gender of the person in need. So, heroes often face the challenge of crossing the beauty threshold. What other factors influence altruism? Robert Levine and his colleagues at California State University decided to assess the willingness to help in different parts of the world. They placed stamped and addressed envelopes on randomly selected car windshields and included handwritten cards that read, "I saw this letter by your car." They wanted to see how many of these envelopes would be placed in mailboxes by kind strangers. They also dropped pens on the ground in front of random passers-by and recorded how many people picked them up and returned them. Additionally, a healthy researcher intentionally pretended to struggle to pick up a dropped magazine with a leg brace, and they observed how many people came to his aid. The researchers conducted this experiment in the capital cities of 23 countries. They left about 800 envelopes, dropped over 400 pens, and feigned difficulty in over 500 instances with the leg brace. They encountered various challenges along the way, such as countries without mailboxes or people suspicious of envelopes left on the ground. Despite these obstacles, they persisted and eventually compiled an international ranking of altruism. The capital of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, and the capital of Costa Rica, San Jose, ranked highest. At the bottom of the list were Singapore, New York, and Kuala Lumpur. In San Jose, 95% of people helped the researcher with the leg brace pick up the magazine, while in New York, only 28% were willing to assist. The researchers further analyzed the results and concluded that population density inversely correlates with altruism. They explained this phenomenon with the theory of urban overload. This theory suggests that people living in cities often feel overwhelmed by sensory stimulation and information bombardment, leading them to develop a habit of minding their own business to avoid being inundated with excessive information. This is also the source of what people often refer to as urban loneliness. Moreover, in fast-paced city life, people are generally very busy, and increased time pressures leave them with less time and energy to care about others. However, while city size does influence altruism, it's not the whole truth. We find that the bystander effect is a significant factor in the lack of altruism. When others are present, people are less likely to help. The more other people are around, the less likely any individual is to act. Why is this the case? It's because, with more people present, each person feels less responsible, leading to a diffusion of responsibility. This diffusion reduces the likelihood of any individual taking action. Other bystanders' behavior naturally influences an individual's judgment of the situation, which in turn affects their own behavior. If others appear indifferent, it's easier for individuals to believe the situation isn't urgent and refrain from taking action. Sometimes, people are also hesitant to help due to concerns about how others will perceive their actions, fearing judgment from their peers. These situational factors play a significant role in influencing altruistic behavior. In this book, we've also included some additional relevant experiments. For example, research has found that when the weather is good, people tend to leave larger tips because they are more willing to help or express goodwill when they are in a good mood. People who have played funny games together tend to feel closer and find each other more attractive. For all you single folks listening to our program, are you feeling inspired by this? These are the topics we've covered in our third question. Each of us is a social being, so we are easily influenced by group dynamics, authority figures, and shared culture. We often conform to the group and authority, treat similar individuals more kindly, and sometimes, due to our fast-paced lives or the bystander effect, we may stand by and not help others in need. Now, let's recap the key points from this book. 1. Self-enhancement *. When we engage in self-perception, we tend to have a self-enhancement bias. We attribute problems in ways that favor ourselves, highlighting our positive qualities and downplaying our flaws. Some individuals excel at self-monitoring and are skilled liars, while others remain consistent in their behavior. 2. Social conformity *. We have a strong tendency to conform to social norms and seek social approval. This inclination often leads us to view ourselves as superior to others, and our sense of humor can reveal our biases and stereotypes. 3. Group influence *. We are constantly influenced by groups, authority figures, and shared culture. We easily accept authority suggestions and obey them. We succumb to the pressure of the group and may even change our beliefs and behaviors to align with the group. Through a series of experiments on helping behavior, we discovered several simple yet powerful principles. For example, we are more likely to help people who are similar to us in some way. Additionally, the presence of more bystanders decreases the likelihood of any individual taking action. In summary, This book provides valuable insights into the often overlooked aspects of our daily lives. Over the past century, quirky psychologists have spent extensive time studying millions of death records, observing people's behavior and expressions in supermarkets and bowling alleys, and even subjecting murderers' bodies to electric shocks or intentionally obstructing traffic at traffic lights. Through these ingenious methods, they have studied people like you and me, helping us uncover the hidden secrets of everyday psychology. For the first time, we realize how fascinating our everyday lives truly are. This book has now introduced you to these concepts. Congratulations on completing another book, and thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like this video, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Together, let's combine wisdom with action to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.